Jordan. Hi, Jordan. We've got a couple of people already logging in. Excellent. We're going to wait just a second so everybody gets logged in, okay? We don't want anybody to miss any of this great information that we're sharing today.
So Mark, are we going to have a drum roll for you or?
You should.
Oh, all right. Well, we've got a good amount of people on here already. We'll be seeing some more log in here shortly. My name is Emma Jane. I want to welcome you all to Webinar Wednesday. We are so excited to have you here today. What an exciting topic. We are going to be talking about the DOE 2023 information. I know all of you guys are sitting on pins and needles wanting to hear all about it. So our presenter today is going to be Mark Woodruff. He is accompanied by Scott Coleman and Mike. I'm not going to butcher your name, but I think it's Topitzhofer.
Just call him Mikey T.
It's
Mikey T. All right.
Mike T works unless you pronounce it perfectly like you just did.
Oh, I did? Topitzhofer?
Yep, you got it.
All right. Excellent. I'm going to pass it over to Mark here in just one second, but before we get started, I do have a couple housekeeping items. We will take questions throughout the webinar. However, we're going to hold them all until the end. Down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see two little speech bubbles with a Q&A underneath it. If you go there, you can click on that and you can type your questions in throughout the entire webinar. I will read them out loud to the group at the end and have the Trane gentleman answer your questions. If you have questions that are related to maybe you can't hear very well or something's not working or you're having issues with Zoom or you have a question directly related to me as far as housekeeping items, you can reach me directly through the chat function on the bottom of your screen. With that, I'm really excited to pass it on over to Mark to kick off this webinar.
All right, great. Hey, thanks, Emma. Yeah, this is Mark Woodruff, everybody. Like Emma mentioned, we are going to be talking today about the new DOE minimum efficiency standards change that's taken effect on January the 1st of 2023. And I think just conversationally and for shorthand, we've been calling it either DOE 2023. You might have heard people say that term before. You may also hear people talk about the new M1 standard. It's the same thing, right? DOE 2023 and M1, they are one and the same. I am going to talk about the standard a little bit. It is a national regulatory requirement, and so it affects all of the different manufacturers. We all have to comply. Me being with Trane, I will present a little bit of material that is specific, to our brand in particular, but I'll be sure to point that out when I get there. But most of the material, 90%, is common and standard and applies to all of the different manufacturers. So with that, I will get started here on the first slide. If you're not familiar with the new standard, DOE 2023, there are two really big points to understand. I think the first is that the minimum efficiencies are increasing, and that should, not be unfamiliar territory to a lot of you. If you've been in the industry for a while, over time, you've seen minimum efficiencies slowly move up, right? The bar gets set higher and higher and higher. And so, we're going through that process again with this new regulatory change. So this, again, should not be unfamiliar territory to anyone if you've been in the industry for a while. What is different about this go around with the new 2023 standard is that there is a new test procedure that we as manufacturers have to use when we calculate the minimum efficiency of our equipment. And so, when we test equipment in the lab setting, we calculate our efficiencies. The government is changing the way that we test the equipment and changing the way that we calculate our efficiency. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the slides that are coming up. But along with this new test procedure, coming with that are new metrics. So you may have heard that we're not going to rate the efficiency of our equipment using the terms SEER and EER and HSPF. The new metrics are SEER2, EER2, and HSPF2. And I think why the government did that is just to make it clear and easy for people like yourself out there in the field. If you're looking at an efficiency number, to make it easy for you guys to identify, okay, if I'm seeing a 15 SEER, is that using the new test criteria or the old test criteria, right? And so just creating those new metrics gave a quick and easy identifier for folks to understand what they're looking at specifically, a new rating or an old rating. The next point there on the slide, so what has changed or what did change with this new standard? And the answer is there's a lot of things that changed, but I think the two most important topics to discuss and what's certainly capturing most of the discussion points out there that I see in the field are that, number one, the duct static test point that we use when we test our equipment in the lab is going up to 5x what it is today. So for example, when we test equipment in the lab to calculate the efficiency, we put duct work on the indoor unit, the air handler or the furnace, and that duct restriction in today's standard can be as low as 0.1 inches of static depending on the tonnage size, and that 0.1 minimum is going up to 0.5. So that's a 5x increase on duct static when we test our equipment. And so if you think about that, if you take a piece of equipment that you have today, you apply more restriction on the ductwork, that increased restriction means more load on the indoor blower motor, and that means more power consumption, more watts on the indoor equipment. And so if you take something that you are producing right now today, a piece of equipment, a system, and test it to the old standard and then test it again to the new standard, even though you didn't change anything about the equipment, you're going to see a lower reported system efficiency, even though you didn't change the system, right? It's no more or less efficient than it was before, but just by virtue of this new test process that we have to follow, you get a reduced or a lower reported system efficiency. And I think that's a key point for us to understand as we get into some of the later slides. I'm going to talk more about that. So that's one thing that changed. The second thing that changed in the standard is more on the heating side for heat pumps. The heating load line has been moved, and that has a negative effect on the HSPF rating. So just like the point that we just talked about, you can take a piece of equipment, test it to the old standard, test it to the new standard, and even though you didn't change anything, you're going to get a lower HSPF efficiency reported with the new standard just by virtue of the way they've changed the way that we have to calculate HSPF. And so we'll talk more about the ratings themselves on the next slide, but I think the high level takeaway for this slide is that the good news is that entry level products are going to be more efficient, which is great for homeowners, right? Because that is going to help them save money on their utility bills each and every month, right? That's a good thing. However, the flip side of that is that, as a manufacturer, we have to put more cost into the equipment to meet these higher efficiency requirements, right? So on the next slide, I'm going to talk about the actual efficiencies and how they're changing. So I just blew up the graphics that were on the slide before so that hopefully they're a little bit easier to read. You can read the numbers a little better. But if you ask yourself, all right, so what's different with these new minimum efficiencies? How are they changing? A couple of points here. So the first is that you can see there are new minimum efficiencies. The numbers are different, right? So 13 SEER today is going to increase to 13.4 SEER 2 in the future with the new M1 standards. So you're going from 13 to 13.4 for ACs in the north. If you look at heat pumps, you can see that we're going from 14 SEER to 14.3 SEER 2, right? And we're going from 8.2 HSPF to 7.5 HSPF 2. So the numbers themselves are moving and increasing. The second point, you might notice if you compare the different regions, the North region, the Southwest, and the Southeast regions, the heat pump efficiency requirement is the same everywhere in the US, right? The new requirement is 14.3 SEER2 and 7.5 HSPF2, regardless of what region you're in. And that 14.3 SEER2, by the way, is roughly equivalent to 15 SEER today. Remember how we talked about how you take a piece of equipment and you calculate SEER versus SEER2, you get a lower reported efficiency. That's kind of highlighting that there, that to hit the new 14.3 SEER2 requirement, that's roughly equivalent to today's 15 SEER. So we talked about heat pump efficiency is the same across the US. AC efficiency, it depends on the region. It varies by your region. So you can see a different minimum air conditioning efficiency for the North versus the Southwest versus the Southeast. And then something else that is new is that for ACs, the minimum efficiency for the two southern regions, Southwest and Southeast, the minimum efficiency requirement varies depending on the capacity of the equipment. And the break line is 45,000 BTUs. So smaller equipment, less than 45,000 BTUs, the new minimum is 14.3 SEER2 and 1170 ER, you can see that. And then for equipment that is larger than 45,000 BTUs, the requirement is 13.8 and 11.2. So credit to the government. They love to make our life more complicated, and they did a good job by adding an extra piece of complexity here with that capacity difference. And then the last point here is you might notice that the HSPF is going from 8.2 to 7.5, which sounds a little odd, right? That the efficiency looks like it's going down. You go from 8.2 to 7.5, that's going down. But by virtue of that new HSPF calculation that I talked about on the prior slide, that new 7.5 is actually harder to hit than the old 8.2. It's actually higher than a higher efficiency than the old 8.2. So everything that we've talked about and everything that you're seeing on the slide, these new minimums and everything, this is all single phase residential equipment. Three phase, if you're using any three phase, is unaffected. Three phase less than 65,000 BTU split systems. Those are exempt from DOE until January of 2025. So we have a few more years before that takes effect for small splits. All right. On the next slide, what I want to talk about is the difference when you try to compare SEER versus SEER2. And I think the point here is that a lower SEER2 does not necessarily mean that that is less efficient. So for example, 14.3 SEER2 is roughly equivalent to today's 15 SEER. And that's important to understand because, you know, with minimum efficiencies going from 14 to 14.3, that really doesn't sound like a lot, right? It sounds like a very small change. But in reality, we're having to go from 14 to essentially 15 SEER, but the reported number is different because it's in SEER2. That second bullet there, you can see that 15.2 SEER2 is roughly equivalent to 16 SEER. And I say roughly because there is no equation that you can use to directly convert SEER to SEER2. It truly is a matter of running the equipment through the test process and determining the new efficiency requirement. There's not just an equation that you can apply to convert one to the other. And so that's why I'm saying approximately. I think the important thing here to highlight is that we recognize that 16 SEER today is a very popular upgrade spec for homes in new construction out there today with a lot of different builders. And I think the takeaway here is that what you should, in your mind, think of 15.2 SEER2 that's the new 16, right? If you're looking for what in the future is going to be equivalent to today's 16 SEER equipment, the answer is look for 15.2 SEER 2 equipment product to be equivalent to your old 16 SEER equipment. Okay. So this slide here is talking about the product release process that we're following at Trane Technologies. Now, I understand other manufacturers they could be following different processes specifically, but I think by and large you'll find the process is going to be common in that for each of our different product families that we're releasing, we have a schedule that we're following around when are we releasing product data. And when I say product data, when are we releasing the model numbers and the pricing and the literature, the AHRI ratings, getting information published in the RightSoft system, things like that. There is a schedule and a calendar for that as we're going through the process of transitioning from our legacy product over to the new DOE product. And then with Trane, we're intentionally waiting 4 months after that product release before we're actually transitioning product in our factories. And the reason that we're giving that 4-month period between when we release product data and when we actually convert and transition to the new DOE product in the factory is to give our customers time to do things like processing, what is changing in the product and getting familiar with what's new with the new DOE standard equipment, to communicate price changes downstream and working with their customers, to plan future jobs and future orders for jobs that you may be committing to today, but you may not be setting the equipment for several months yet to come, right? So to plan for that process. And in cases, for example, where you have project quotes and things like that that need to get updated with the new equipment products and everything, just to allow time for all of those processes to happen so that everything goes smoothly with the transition, right? We don't want to spring this on anybody and cause problems in the builder world, because we realize that there is a schedule, right, on your side. All right. The next slide is going to talk about the ability to install legacy equipment, so non-DOE 2023 equipment after January the 1st, because there are some rules there that everybody needs to be familiar with. So the good news is that with heat pumps, all legacy heat pumps have unlimited sell-through in all regions. So regardless of where you are in the country, if there is any inventory of legacy or old heat pumps that exist out there, those can be installed in perpetuity anywhere in the country. So there's no concern around equipment being orphaned or stranded or not being able to be set because it doesn't meet new efficiency requirements and things like that. There's unlimited sell-through on heat pumps. That is a little bit different as we get here to the next slide, where we're talking about air conditioners. Air conditioners in the northern region are just like heat pumps. They can be installed in perpetuity. There's no concern in the north. What's tricky here is in the south, the southeast and the southwest, the two southern regions. Those are governed by some sell-through stipulations. And essentially the requirement is that any equipment sold or installed after January the 1st of 2023, it has to meet the new minimum efficiencies regardless of when it was produced. Okay, that's the key thing to understand there. And on the slide I'm showing specifically for Trane, our current 14 SEER product that we have and our side discharge AC does not meet that future state 14.3 SEER 2 minimum for the future. And so we are trying very diligently to make sure that this message is communicated to all of our channels downstream, all of our customers, that they know that the legacy 14s cannot be sold or installed after January the 1st of 2023. And I imagine that's very similar with other manufacturers as well. I'm sure they're doing similar communications to have different families that have this stipulation attached to them because of their efficiency. But for us, we're trying to do a really good job of making sure that our customers are aware that the legacy 14s can't be installed after January the 1st. Okay. This is my next to last slide here. This is, again, a Trane specific slide, but I think the trend or the theme is probably very common with other manufacturers. As we've gone through the process of, transitioning our legacy product lines over to the new DOE 2023 compliant products, we've made some changes to our product lineup. Things are different, right, in the future state, what we offer in the future versus what we have offered in the past. And in a lot of cases, dealers and builders are going to need to get used to some new product names, right? As you take equipment, test it to the new standard. We use a naming convention like XR16, XR17, and that number attached to that, 16 means it's 16 SEER. And as we talked about, 16 SEER is roughly equivalent to 15.2 SEER 2. And so we've kind of gone through a process of renaming our product families as we've designed the new equipment to the new minimum efficiencies. And so that's just a matter of dealers becoming used to the new product names that we're coming out with for the DOE product. Okay. And that was actually my last slide. The last slide here is just to show the contact information for Scott and for Mikey T. And if anyone needs any additional information, definitely feel free to reach out to those guys and get some extra information if you had any open questions. But thank you. I really appreciate the time to come and talk to you today. I guess, Emma, just let me know if there are any questions.
I do have one question. I'm not sure if we can answer it fully, but I'll go ahead and ask it. And David Nelson from Richmond, Virginia is asking if, he says his HVAC trade partners are having trouble getting some American standard equipment. Lead times are extending out, and he's wondering if that is possibly related to the planned change in equipment manufacturing.
Gotcha. Yeah, great question. No, I think right now we're kind of in the middle of a global supply chain, issue, right? For all products. If you've gone and looked at whether you're looking for a television or a dishwasher, if you go to the store, right, the selection of what's available on the shelf is not as good as it usually is, and that's just by virtue of fighting and trying to get motors and compressors and all the bits and pieces that go into making HVAC equipment. It probably has more to do with that than it does anything to do with the DOE transition.
So you're talking about the raw materials on the other side of the supply chain from between you and the builder.
Correct.
Yeah, that is a fun topic.
Yes, it is.
Do we have any other questions? That was a great presentation, so much information and very valuable, and having a good understanding, especially understanding the difference between the SEER and the SEER 2, and having some good knowledge to be able to speak about the differences and how you can coordinate SEER 2, 15.3 and 16, and knowing that those are very similar. Sharon wants to know, is there any idea of what kind of increases they will see?
Yeah, that's hard to answer. It's going to vary by, manufacturer to manufacturer, distributor to distributor. I really can't comment on precise numbers for anybody. It's really hard to answer.
Gotcha. Does that help, Sharon? I hope that gives you an idea. It is a complicated issue depending on where you are on the supply chain, I'm sure. Any other questions? Scott, do you have anything you want to add? I see you unmuted yourself.
No, I just was going to be available if there are any questions that I could answer.
I don't see any other questions. You guys did a very good, that was very thorough. Everybody's probably trying to digest all that information.
Yeah, I'll just add, thank you, Mark. Thought that was a really good presentation. You just have a knack for breaking down some complex things in a easy to understand way. So thank you for that.
I think maybe some other takeaways is just, again, we're uploading information to HRI. That information also goes over to RightSoft. You're going to have your RightSoft manual J's are probably going to need to be starting to be updated. So whoever you're working with from a dealer standpoint, or if you're using a third-party company like PEG or somebody like that, it would not be a bad subject at all. And maybe one of your next calls is just say, listen, we need to be aware of this. And especially if you're using ACs and you're not using heat pumps, you've got a couple of things. One, obviously, you've got to make sure your energy sheets are updated and your permits are updated. And then I think the big thing is really if you're setting furnace and coils, and you think you're going to be crossing over into next year, you're going to have to make sure that you're using the new M1 standard for your permitting and those types of things, or you're going to have two pieces of equipment that are out of sync.
Oh, good point. We do have another question. What is the variable speed range of the XV18?
Mark, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. Generally, our 18 SEER equipment by and large is rated 18 SEER with all the different matches. That number can, stretch a little higher, 18, 19 SEER, depending on what the indoor match is. But generally, if you see an XV18, that means most of the ratings are 18 SEER. XV20, most of the ratings are 20 SEER, things like that. We try to kind of use the average efficiency when we name our products.
Excellent.
And Mark, I don't know if this was the question added. Can you answer the turn down ratio or the variable speed range?
Yeah, so our variable speed systems, okay. Yeah, our variable speed systems, so they can turn down to as low as 25% of max capacity. And we have modulation at 0.1% built into our compressor. So if if you're used to thinking about stages, single stage equipment, two stage equipment, that translates to roughly 750 different operating speeds for the variable speed equipment. So really strong performance, really great comfort, amazing temperature and humidity control for the home, especially when you pair that with the zoning system, which I hope people are doing. And, with these, especially as you talk about high efficiency homes with the spray foam and all of that, moisture is always part of the discussion that comes into play of how do you manage the moisture in the home. And that's where variable speed systems really can play a role in helping you to manage that with their low operating speeds and capabilities to really remove a lot of moisture. So yeah, just something to think about there.
Excellent. And you got to thank you. That's exactly what they were looking for. So you hit the nail on the head with that one. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? We've got these guys here for us to answer all these questions that you might have. So take advantage of this time.
I'll just add too that if efficiency metrics are part of your marketing at all, if you're calling out specific SEER ratings as a benefit to homeowners, that would be something you need to start thinking about updating. You can, if you're calling out, we build to a 16 SEER, for example. Mark mentioned the new 16 is generally 15.2 SEER 2. You may want to call out, we build better than the minimum. That's another option, but something to think about. And then this will be a little bit of a challenge, but I think in general, we're all going to have to get a little more comfortable with decimals. It used to be 13 in the north, 14 in the south were the minimums, 16 common upgrade spec. And those are changing to 14.3 and 15.2, 13.4 in the north. So we'll have to get a lot more comfortable with decimals for sure. And then I think for a period of time, it'll be pretty important that we specify whether we're talking about a spec for the current M1 standard and SEER or the new SEER 2 M1 standard. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to.
Good point. And decimals are so fun. We have another question. Any changes to the Freon? What about requirements for residential check, or res check, HERS, blower, doors? What does that change anything with the units?
Yeah, great question. So the first part there was around the refrigerant. So there is a new regulation that is going to push new refrigerants across the industry, but that does not take effect until January of 2025. And so all of the new DOE equipment that we're coming out with is using the current R410 refrigerant. We're not, at this point in time, we're not going to go ahead and transition to that new refrigerant until closer to the 2025 date.
Then I can take a stab at the second part of that with, I believe blower door testing, duct leakage testing, those types of things will be independent of any of these changes here. But good questions just to talk about these changes with your HERS rater if you're doing ratings.
Great, thank you. All right. I don't have any more questions here.
It's good questions coming in.
I know, they're very good questions. And we have everybody still here and waiting to, I'm sure there's a question brewing somewhere in here because everybody's still on, paying attention.
We talked a little bit yesterday, just, you've got local utility and incentive programs, and 45L was out there, although currently it's not even a viable program. So we're not sure how some of those types of utility rebates or any future 45L are going to be impacted by it. But I would definitely start looking into, if you have local incentives, how those incentives are going to be affected and how they're going to redo the rating requirements.
Oh, here we go. Another question. Any idea how the 14.3 SEER 2 equipment will impact a HERS rating?
No, not yet, but I do know ResNet is starting to work on or making changes to their calculation for exactly that point. That's a good question.
This is a great webinar. You guys are kind of ahead of the curve on this one, getting everybody prepared to start looking at what kind of questions they need to ask and what they need to start doing to prepare for changes that are coming down the pipeline. These are great questions. I don't have any more questions. I want to thank everybody for coming. You will get an email tomorrow thanking you for joining us with the webinar. Scott's email will be on there. So if you think of questions afterwards, please feel free to email Scott or Mike and contact them. They'll be happy to help you out and answer any questions you have regarding the new DOE 2023 information that was shared today. If you need anything else, feel free to contact us. We are so happy you were here with us for Webinar Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you, Mike, Scott, and Mark for sharing your wisdom today and being here for our builders. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Emma.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.